On today's episode of Locked On Wild, the season is officially here as the Minnesota Wild start the 2024-2025 season on Thursday. We'll talk about the first two games of the year, plus interesting debuts for a couple of Wild prospects on the collegiate side.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we are your team each and every day. And we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, Alex Micheletti joins us to preview the start of the 2024-2025 season. Take a look at the first couple of games on the schedule for the Minnesota Wild, talk about the roster, talk about potential breakout candidates this year, and we'll talk about the collegiate debuts for a couple of Wild prospects that were on both ends of the radar in terms of effectiveness. My name is Seth Toupal, credentialed Wild media member and host of Locked On Wild since 2021, and we are celebrating a victory Micheletti Monday here today because Gophers won, Vikings won, and until the Minnesota Wild actually play, I reserve the right to celebrate victory Micheletti Mondays when other Minnesota teams get the job done.
Yeah, it's all good vibes right now. So let's let's hope it continues in a couple days for the Wild.
Yeah, it's where the slate is clean. Everybody is going in with hopes. Well, maybe not everybody, but many teams are going in with hopes of hoisting the Stanley Cup at the end of the season. And for the Minnesota Wilds, they're hoping to avoid a disastrous start again this season like they had last year, which led to Dean Evason getting fired. John Hines comes in. Wild missed the playoffs, and they are out for business here this season, Alex. But we look at the Central Division, and I think my thought on this is it's going to take one of the four teams that we expect to make the postseason, whether it be Winnipeg, whether it be Nashville, whether it be Dallas, whether it be Colorado. I feel like in order for the Wild to get in, one of those teams is going to have to fall out in order for Minnesota to find the postseason this year.
Yeah, I think if you're going through those teams, I think it has to be Winnipeg that the Wild would have to hope drops out. They do have Hellebuck, but he is. I got to see him for the first time in person. During the preseason the other day. When he lets in a couple, either it was just because it was preseason, but he can go pear shaped really fast.
Yeah.
And if his D in front of him are lackadaisical and playing loose, it can it's a roller coaster with that Winnipeg Jets squad, and they continue to be kind of like in a half rebuild, transition of a team. They're going to have a new coach, so we'll see how that goes for them as well. So since Bones retired, so it'll be interesting to see if Winnipeg can hold their spot or not.
Well, it's going to rely on the strength of their defense and their goaltending if it's going to happen. Much like the Minnesota Wild, I think if we go through all three units, we expect that the defense will be better with Jared Spurgeon back and healthy. He looked good in his preseason tune-up against Chicago. The first game that he played, couple of goals. Not to say that he didn't look good in the other one, but that first game back looked really sharp. And so the hope is that the defense will be better. The hope is the special teams will be substantially better. Is the offense going to be able to scratch a few more goals across this year than they did last year? I think that's the big question this season. Line combinations, at least at this point, are pretty optimal with Marco Rossi, with Kirill, and with Matt Zuccarello. So is the offense going to be better this year?
Yeah, it's that's the number one. I mean, out of everything, I mean, the way Ek is looking in camp and preseason, he looks like he's ready to go full out and have a career season. And that second line is so huge for everything for the Wild. Is Marcus Johansson going to have a bounce back year? Is he going to drop out of the lineup, or fourth line? Is Liam Ogren going to get a chance there? Is someone else going to get the chance to move up to that second line? That they're going to need a third guy. They have Ek and Boldy. There is Boldy going to stay healthy? That's huge too. You don't want a guy coming into the season off an injury and where you haven't been able to go full go. So that's one to keep an eye out for Thursday to see how Boldy looks compared to the rest of the guys. Because those guys have been playing games and Boldy hasn't been. So there's always a risk for quick, easy re-injury, especially since it's lower body. So fingers crossed he can get through game one with no re-injury.
Yeah, if he is to re-injure, that just kind of feels like a bad omen,
right,
for what is going on the rest of the rest of the season. Other than Boldy, the Wild avoided any injuries, really. I think Jake Middleton was really the only other player that got banged up during the preseason. And so that feels fortunate, because last year when Spurgeon got hurt against Chicago in the preseason, it was completely downhill from there.
Right.
What about the goaltending? Because you've got Filip Gustavsson, you got Marc-Andre Fleury, you got Jesper Wallstedt, I guess, too. And so I worry less about Gus, but are we going to see the Wilds throw Marc-Andre Fleury a bunch of starts? And is he going to be able to handle that? Like, you don't know with the guy that's 39 years old.
Right. Then that you want to talk about injury, that, I mean, with that, how are they going to handle the workload, and when are they going to give? There's a lot of unknowns right now with the 3 goalie rotation. But of course, you don't want Jesper just sitting in the box for a long period of time.
Yeah,
then you completely fall out of rhythm. And is Gus going to bounce back? Because Fleury didn't have a great year last year, but he was a little bit better than Gus. And it's like they tried all summer to try to move Gus. So he's coming into this season not a happy camper. And so that's one that's going to be like, how are they going to figure out the rotation here? Because it's not ideal for any of them, I don't think. And Fleury didn't sign up again to sit a lot of games either. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to watch from his perspective as well.
Yeah, he didn't come in here to only play against his former teams.
Right.
Like he still wants to play. Bill Guerin is still confident that he is capable of 40 starts a season, which I think that is, if we're putting that take on the coffee scale, that is straight black coffee with nothing in it. That's a bit strong.
No, and with the way Marc-Andre plays, his style, leaves him open to getting hurt or pulling a groin or something something lower body, and you want to be really careful with him, especially if they think they're going to make the playoffs. That's who you would want to go with in the playoffs, I think.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions, but honestly, I think the preseason did some good to kind of steer things in the right direction. Obviously, you got to take preseason results with a little bit of a grain of salt.
Right.
But power play was great. Penalty kill was good. Line combinations look good. The team played hard, I think, which is another really good one. Like, we were kind of coming in to this season wondering if this is the year that Chicago starts to kind of claw their way back in, and they just in
like a mess. Yeah.
straight postseason games, they absolutely annihilated them.
Yeah, it's weird to see, right? Just with the history between the two.
It was embarrassing. If I'm Luke Richardson for Chicago, I'm probably not happy with the effort in either of those games because it was a no contest.
Yeah, and they made some key moves over the summer to try to surround Bedard with more talent, getting Bertuzzi, and just trying to get they're trying to get more physical too, and it's kind of a mess right now, and you feel bad for Mrazek because it looks like they're going to give up a ton of goals.
I audibly said, "Oh no," when Brodin got him to bite on the fake dump attempt, and then he just lasered one in.
2 goals.
I was like, "Oh, Peter, you can't be out of the net for that."
No, what is you doing?
That brought me back to Mike Smith against Colorado in the Western Conference Finals, where he gave up the goal from center ice
because he was Oilers fans when they had the Mike Smith experience.
Yeah, PTSD about like half ice goals is just it's dicey, but it all comes down. I think if you want to boil it down to one single thing, Alex, that is going to define this season, it's going to be that second line.
Yes.
We're going to be talking about it all season, and it seems like it's one particular spot in that line that is the subject of all of the contention. So we'll see, because as we'll talk about with the roster coming up next, it seems pretty likely that Liam Ogren is going to be on the opening night roster unless the Wild play the cap accrual game, which they could. Mm-hmm. But we'll talk about what looks like the final roster as well as the first 2 opponents of the season as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Indeed. We are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Plus, listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Congratulations going out to one of the OG YouTube commenters, Tyler Bach, who is the winner of the inaugural Locked On Wild sweepstakes. Thank you to everybody that participated. We had over 50 entries for our first ticket giveaway. I say first because we're going to do it again a couple of times this season. Just a fun way to kind of get the audience involved. And so if you didn't win this time, don't worry. We'll do this again. And I appreciated all the nice words that everybody had to say in the emails that they sent. Really, really fun to read all of those and to get to know the audience a little better. So congratulations to Tyler. Hit that. The email should be in your inbox with instructions on what comes next for those tickets. So full rules can be found, again, for those that maybe want to see, full rules can be found in the description of today's episode. All right, Alex, let's talk about the roster, because it seems like, and you know what's going to happen is that this episode's going to get released. The official roster will be released shortly thereafter. But the latest that we had is the training camp roster is down to 27 players. And there are a few, in fact, the 4 that are on the roster outside of the 23 are all injured. And so they can't be moved until they are able to be, healthy and put on the AHL rosters. So the 4 names that are not the regular lineup are Graham Clark, Luke Toporowski, Michael Milne, and Troy Grosnick. Those are the 4 names that get it up to 27. But the Wild's as of right now carrying a 23-man roster, which is something they could not do last year, which includes Matt Boldy, Yakov Trenin, Joel Eriksson Ek, Marcus Foligno, Murat Huznadinov, Marco Rossi, Liam Ogren, Matt Zuccarello, Ryan Hartman, Freddie Gaudreau, Marcus Johansson, Jakub Lauko, Kirill Kaprizov as your forwards. 13 forwards. 7 defensemen. John Merrill, Jake Middleton, Brock Faber, Zach Bogosian, Jonas Brodin, Jared Spurgeon, Declan Chisholm, and 3 goalies. Marc-Andre Fleury, Jesper Wallstedt, and Filip Gustavsson. So unless they decide to accrue cap, which with 2 home games right off the bat, you theoretically could. But as of right now, if they go with the full 23-man roster, that appears to be it. And so, it is interesting because when the preseason was winding down, John Hines gave some pretty glowing reviews to Damon Hunt. But he was still sent.
That guy.
Yeah. He was still sent down to Iowa, which means he's probably the injury fill-in as of right now. To get called up if anybody gets hurt on the current roster. But the one that's interesting here is Liam Ogren, because his preseason started off a little on the slow side, but he more than picked it up in the back half of the preseason. He played really, really well. It is in position to potentially make the team, but is he going to play?
Yeah, that's what's frustrating for him is you want to see him play, but if he makes the team and then is just sitting in the press box near you, that doesn't help at all for his development. And so that it's got to be frustrating for him. Well, it was crazy. at the beginning of training camp, he wasn't even on a line that you would say is an NHL line, and then he kind of forced his way up. As training camp went along, and then he had a couple of good preseason games. He scored against Winnipeg when I was there that night, and he looked really comfortable on that second line with Ek, and so filling in for Boldy, and so but of course Marcus Johansson's kind of just has his spot locked down, so that he'll in the future, he'll have to battle out with Yurov probably in that top 6 type of role. But for now, the veteran, just I guess because he's a veteran, it gets it over Ogren. So that's going to be one, as we've mentioned earlier in the episode, that we're going to watch closely. Marcus is in a contract year, so. If he wants to stay in the NHL, and not go back to Sweden or somewhere else overseas, he's going to have to produce. There's no way out of it now.
Am I going to have to do like the Marcus meter this year?
I think so.
Where I chart, because like we charted it last year. Right. I can't just chart the performance this year because we'll get into the specific line combinations as we get closer to Thursday. I'm kind of the belief that I think Freddie's going to be better this year because he's in a low leverage situation.
Yep.
There really just aren't a ton of expectations for what he's going to do this year, which I think is going to allow him to just be part of that very hardworking fourth line with Kuznetsov and with Lauko. I think those guys are going to push him pretty nicely. So I'm not as worried. I'm not as worried about him because again, it's a fourth line spot. If he can't semi-produce there, then he's not going to be on the team next year.
Right. Well, and the only thing you really have to worry about with him, since he said low leverage, is if they throw him out there for penalty kill. Then that's where you can be very critical of his time.
Which I'm kind of wondering too, if the Wild really are looking at giving Matt Boldy some more time there. I kind of wonder if maybe Gaudreau was a placeholder next to Marcus Foligno as one of the forward combinations.
But now that he got hurt, it's thrown off every. He can be in those meetings, but if you're not on the ice doing what they want to do, then it's it's a little bit different. And you want to be careful, like I mentioned earlier. You really want to be careful with him at the start here, not overdoing it and aggravating an injury. Because if they go weeks without him, that's
bad.
Yes,
that's bad.
Yes. And then you're hoping Marcus can do it all on the second line, which is, oh man, that'd be catastrophic.
It's just not going to happen. And so I think I will create the Marcus meter, because as long as what the hope is that as long as that line is productive, he's going to stay there. But if that line combination starts to struggle,
and if he's the anchor, if he brings down those other two, then we have a huge problem.
The calls for Liam Ogren are going to get louder and louder. And so it's pretty simple. Produce and stay in the lineup. If you don't, bye-bye. So we'll see. I don't know about the 3 goalies thing, but I don't want to beat it to death.
Right.
Until we get official word. I'll circle back and revisit this on Thursday. If the roster looks the way that it does. But Columbus, Seattle on the schedule this week, 2 home games to start, and then it is literally an eternity on the road. And so we'll take a look at the start of the season. We'll also take a look at who I think is going to be the breakout star for this year's Minnesota Wild team. We'll talk about all that as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wilds after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed as well when you place your first $5 bet. And best of all, it doesn't even have to be a winner. Win or lose, $5 bet gets you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. If you went with the Steelers last night, you are probably kicking yourself until you break your toe that Dallas came back and won that game. Although, to be honest, that might have been, I think that still was a cover by the Steelers, but still, they had the game pretty much won, and then Dallas gets that
a rain delay in football. Crazy.
Yeah. Hurricane rain delay led to that game being done, well after midnight. But best part is, even if you took the Steelers, you still would get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with your first $5 bet. So head to FanDuel.com right now to take advantage of this great offer and get the football season started right. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. And we got a lot of content coming at you here before we get started on Thursday. Working on trying to get crossovers with both Locked On Blue Jackets and Locked On Kraken. We have a potentially massive special guest that will be joining later in the week that I'm not going to spoil yet, because still making sure that it's 100% a go, but massive. Like, we're not, and not to say, like, Duhaime was always an elite interview, but Duhaime as a bottom six guy, it's a healthy sized crappie. Like,
Right.
we're talking near the top of the list.
Yes, musky.
So,
Yeah, we're going
yeah.
big fish.
Hooked a big old sturgeon on the Missouri River, and I'm trying to now reel that into the boat and just fighting for my life to make that happen. But we got that. We'll have you covered for Thursday's opener live from the X with all the pre and post game festivities. It's going to be a fun week. It's finally hockey season, and it's time to dive in. And speaking of Thursday, Alex, the Columbus Blue Jackets come to town. Dean Evason at the helm for Columbus. Not only that, obviously it's going to be an emotional game. It's going to be an emotional night with this being the first game for Columbus since Freddie Gaudreau was, since Johnny Gaudreau was killed earlier this summer. So it's going to be a very emotional night. Columbus is going to be, trying to channel their thoughts of him into winning the game. And I think the thing that sticks in my head, it'll be interesting to see if this was just the Dean style of play, because do you remember how fast Columbus was last year when these two teams played? And it ended up being an overtime loss for the Wild, and Filip Gustavsson faced like 58 shots in regulation. I kind of wonder if, because John Hines has tried to adapt to just playing more of a modern style, so I wonder if that helps negate some of the speed, and I wonder if Dean tries to get Columbus to slow things down a little bit.
Yeah, it's they have. I just was bringing up their roster. Their centers are at least their top 9. Or the top 3 centers. You got Sean Monahan, Adam Fantilli, and Cole Sillinger. So that it's kind of unique. Unique players there. They signed 2 guys late. James Van Riemsdyk and Kevin LeBlanc. Kevin LeBlanc was with the Devils, and the Devils wanted to keep him, but because of their cap situation, they had to send him down. And Columbus was able to pick him off, because it was kind of a cap casualty. The Devils wanted to keep him, but now he goes to Columbus a couple days before the start of the season, so that he's going to have to get used to the team rather quickly. They have an interesting group of defensemen too. Provorov is still there, Rowinski, Severson. So it's gonna be interesting. Then they have Elvis Merzlikins and that. So I don't know how Dean is gonna handle this group. It's kind of a hodgepodge of players, some vets that have been in the league for a long time, and guys kind of like on their last leg in the NHL. And then you have some young guys still trying to prove themselves. Kent Johnson and Marchenko, the other Kirill in the league. So. Yeah, it's just an interesting group when you look at their depth chart.
I've heard of probably 4 players on this roster.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Some of these guys, it's like, who, what, where, what league did you play in?
Oh boy.
Yeah. They got Jordan Harris in that Line A trade. That kind of seemed lopsided. Poor Line A's out for a while, but I don't think they got enough for him.
No.
Yeah, it's Thursday could be one of those really boring games, just with Columbus. But having Dean as their head coach, they're going to grind. So the Wild just have to stay out of the box. Just stay out of the box.
Yeah. The Blue Jackets went 4-4 They won 4 and they lost 4. I don't know if that included overtime or not in the preseason. So as Jekyll and Hyde as you would expect. And their losses were 6-1, 3-2, 3-1, and 7-3. They won 3-0, 8-4, 6-3, and 3-1. So figure that out. But
another team that's going to give up a ton of goals.
It feels like for the Wild, in order for them to really get out to feeling good about this season, they need to make sure that Elvis leaves the building having given up more than his share of goals. That is a terrible excuse for a joke.
Yes.
Yeah, we're not off to a good start this season in terms of dry humor, but
yes.
It feels like you just really gotta get your foot on the gas early. Because remember what happened last year? They beat Florida 2-0 in the first game of the season.
Right, Stanley Cup champ.
Filip Gustavsson with the shutout. And after that, it completely unraveled. And so win this game. You then take on a Seattle team that is going to be trying to get off to a much better start under Dan Bylsma, but let's be honest, they're pretty limited offensively.
Yeah.
And
we'll see with getting Brandon Montour was, I can't believe when I saw that come across the bottom of the screen, I couldn't believe that he decided to go with Seattle. And I think they way overpaid Chandler Stevenson from Vegas. So we'll see how he fits in. Matty Benier's got a giant deal over the summer. He had a tough season, so we'll see if he bounces back or not. But their goaltending, it's are they going to go with Grubauer or are they going to go with Decord? We'll see. Both of them were not good last year. It's another team that probably is going to give up a ton of goals. They have given the Wild fits. So we'll see. If you were thinking of two opponents to start the season against, that would be two you would hope can get you in a good spot to start the season.
We're gonna do this all season just because I love to try to play both sides. If the Wild are going to be a playoff team, it really feels like you got to start 2-0.
Yeah,
you got to defend home turf. You got to take care of business against the teams that are below you in the standings, and these two games check those boxes.
Yeah, I mean, when you look back or right at the end of the regular season, you look at games where they would be winnable games, and those are the probably on the entire schedule. Those are two of the teams that you need to get those 2 points and not make it a 3-point game either. I know they aren't in the Central Division, but wins are going to be at a premium in this division. So you take them wherever you can get points.
Yeah, because you've got 7 on the road, and 1, 2, 3. 3 of those are against definite playoff teams. 3 of those are against hopefuls, and so that's a tough test right off the gate. And if you start if you start 1-1 and maybe lose 1 in overtime, that's one thing. But if you start 1-1 or 0-2, and then you go on the road for 7 games,
that's it can turn into a long road trip.
Dicey.
Yes.
So we'll have those games covered, of course, and we'll see what sort of foot gets put down by the Wild to start the season. I want to end on just a couple of quick hitters, and we'll do more of an expansive look at this when I do. There will be a bold predictions episode coming out before Thursday. I think if you had to point to one breakout player for the Wild this year, I think Marat Huznadinov's got that locked down. I think with what he brings speed-wise, I think he's going to be a sneaky good addition to the penalty kill. And a fourth line guy, you don't necessarily expect a lot of production from those guys. But I think Murat is going to take. I think he's going to take and warrant more play, which is going to lead to more opportunities. And I don't know if that translates to 15 to 20 goals this year, but I think we're going to look at the end of the season and say that dude was unbelievably good this year.
Right. Well, and I think everybody expected him to be a top 6 guy, and I don't think he is that. But what he can bring to the team is a guy that can win faceoffs too. Because as we've come to know with this team, they struggle in that department, and so he can add things to this lineup that have been missing over the years, and so his speed is something that that they can use to their advantage as well, because a lot of fourth lines, it's a lot of more rugged players, and he brings a little bit more different than most guys on a fourth line. So clearly, I mean, when you look at Columbus, I mean, they should do a lot better against whatever Columbus throws out there. I mean, they have Matthew Oliver is probably one of the toughest guys in the league. So hopefully he doesn't take out Freddie Gaudreau like Ryan Reeves did last year. But that'll be interesting to see, how, when they are up against Columbus's fourth line, if they, can have an advantage there in the bottom 6.
Yeah. And the final thing, and we talked about this on the live show yesterday, but could not be more polar opposite collegiate debuts that we saw for a couple of Wild prospects this weekend. Zeev Buium played for Denver, and I believe he had 3 assists was the final tally, just adding to what has been just a tremendous collegiate career for him. Charlie Stramel, on the other hand, first game was 3 out of 15 in the faceoff circle, no points, no shots. Second game was better. He did have an assist, and he was over 50% in the faceoff circle, but
you have to do more on the first line. Yeah, they're giving him the chance to be on a team, first line on a team that made the NCAA tournament last year. It's just, I don't know. Tough start already.
Yeah,
after the transfer.
The whole point of the transfer was to be able to stand out more, and that's look, it's early. Right. It's early in the season. There's plenty of time to turn it around, but
the competition's only going to get harder because that was Lake Superior State non-conference. It was not a Big Ten. It was not a Big Ten matchup. So, if he can't produce against Lake Superior State, when you play the big boys of Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, goes back to Wisconsin, how is he going to fare? I'm sure the student section's not going to like that when they see him in green there. So it'll be interesting.
Zeev Buium more points or Charlie Stramel more shots?
Wow. Regal at this point, Regal Lorenz might do better. Who's also a Wild prospect at Denver, might have a better season than Stramel. Yeah, so thank goodness they were able to get Zeev because that totally makes up for the Stramel pick at least.
Yeah,
but it's amazing. Denver's going to try to go back to back, so we'll see if that happens.
Yeah. Time will tell, as it does with pretty much everything related to this Wild team. So that's our episode for today. As we mentioned, we got a lot of content coming at you here before Thursday, and make sure to stick with us. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes as we guide you right up to the start of the season and all the way through it as well. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.